morning, friends, respected Professor Sani, Professor J. Mitra, Professor Kirkar, Professor Pinto, Professor Bode, everybody, my friends from the entire entrepreneurship fraternity, students, faculty of different colleges. The way we have planned this is basically, for the last 6 months, we have traveled across Goa and tried to find out what sort of entrepreneurship is happening in the big, medium, and small. And we met about 57 different types of entrepreneurs. And then we found out where the gaps are, what are the possible areas that we can concentrate. So we have proposed green economy, sustainable development, responsible tourism, these three as the primary charter of this. One very important part that in the proposed program that we wanted to throw light on, because many a times youth gets hooked onto the idea of entrepreneurship means IT. Actually, entrepreneurship and IT are not synonymous. Maybe it's the IT world that we are living in, but at the same time, there are lots of entrepreneurships which are happening across the world which have nothing to do with IT or mobile app. There are many things. We still live in, there are different opportunities. Keeping all these things in mind, and we have a partnership with Essex Business School. So in Calcutta, when we were doing the conference in January and after the conference is not our end thing. Conference is just the beginning, because so many people get together, we share ideas, and from there we take the next step forward. We'll be happy to know 30 young entrepreneurs are supported by us in different networking and other platforms for the last so many months after the Calcutta conference happened. And we named it as Y4Bs, Youth 4Bs. So conference is actually a beginning of the journey. In Goa, we want to take that journey. And that's why I said that, the gap. I was mentioning that, Goa is a destination for marriage, everybody knows. You need flowers, but actually you don't grow flowers. This is an opportunity. This may not be an IT app, but it's an opportunity. So we wanted to showcase what are the possible opportunities. Tourism, there's a huge possibility here. So maybe the need is to look at the local resources rather than copy-paste. We cannot copy-paste Singapore to India. Every country has its own strength and weakness. You cannot do whatever is available in Bombay that may not be available in Vijayawada. And Goa has its own strength, extremely strong in its creativity. So keeping this in mind, we have drawn the plan. So here, the main, we wanted to give an exposure to the young entrepreneurs, the students, the overall, the international perspective. That's where Essex Business School comes in. So Professor J. Mitra, the authority on innovation in business, and also the founder of International Entrepreneurship Forum. He is here. Along with him, Nick Hickson. Then along with Nick, we have Sue Young-Borg. Dr. Borg is living in Germany, but she's from Korea. So, they give a different perspective of the international perspective. In the national, we have brought Mr. Venkatraman, Mr. Suresh Reddy. Venkatraman is a managing director, founder of India Infoline. Then Suresh Reddy, the chairman, founder of Lycos. The new name is Brightcom. I don't know if you recall, 123greeting.com. So that company, the original company of Suresh. And happen to be both of them are my Kharagpur batchmates. So when I request them, they forget that they're the chairman of big companies and they immediately jump. So thank all of them for that. And then we have Dr. Madhav Sate. His movement in Maharashtra is very, very well known. I think it's important that he can actually give youth the call that it is time for entrepreneurship. Maybe we are too dependent on the government. Entrepreneurship is actually an individual effort, the cumulative effort. That's where we thought Professor Sate, Dr. Sate will be a wonderful contributor in this. Tarun Bansal, family started a business in Jaipur, and Tarun took that business as a basis, and then he flourished and made that entire family business into how he runs the operation. Responsible tourism today, one of the best examples in India and in the global fraternity, is Tarun Bansal. So we thank Tarun for joining us in that. And of course, in the first session, you will see it's written creative industry. In creative industry, we didn't want to only put art and culture, but art and culture is an important part. So we thought creativity in work. So we kept one from IT, Lycos, one from finance, because youth today in India is very interested in finance and IT, and one who can be the better bet anywhere in India or in the world, Dr. Subodh Khedkar, Museum of Goa. History, tradition, contemporarization and humor, how he has built it. Never taken a single penny from government. I mean, this is a wonderful story. We have shown, wherever we go, we gain a very good friend. You know, and the gentleman who introduced me to Subodh Khedkar is not from Goa. He's the London School of Economics director. Dr. Eric Barlow actually introduced him. So he's a very well-known international person, not only for his culture, but economics and culture. And that's why we invited him, and he immediately agreed. So this is how we planted the sessions, and we have 3 young entrepreneurs from Goa, young and doing very well. Mahesh Patil, NV Ecofund. I'm sure that you all know him, but I think his story will be wonderful. So he and Smita both are here. And then we have Shuprajit, honey. You know, honey is something that we all know, but that we see in different places. In Goa, how he has developed that honey part of it. I'm sure all of us will love to hear from him. And then we have a last session. Tomorrow we have kept a very important session, Entrepreneurship in Goa. And there we are trying to showcase different parts of entrepreneurship. So we brought Mac Vaz, the gentleman who has actually brought the geographical indication for Feni. And he has done a wonderful job, Mac Vaz. Then Clinton Vaz, the West Management. I don't know if you have visited Clinton's place in the Margao municipality area. The way he and his wife, both of them, work with our dustbin, our waste is actually their resources, how they have planned. So it is a wonderful story Clinton was. Then we have Suraj Morajkar, and from nothing to Hilton. This is another fantastic story of Suraj. And then the 4th speaker in that session, we have Luke Sequeira, the young man. He's a global man from Goa, and how he has taken IT and management and done that. And the 5th, he's the last Suman, but Lola, the brand of Goa, which is actually making noise in the global fashion industry. So this is how we have drawn the entire schedule. But by 2 things, I just want to, at the last I want to mention that the way we have kept every panel discussion, the speakers will speak only for 10 minutes, 3 speakers chair, so 40 minutes, 90-minute session, so rest of the time we have kept it for audience interaction. Last 15 minutes we have kept it to develop a collaborative discussion so that it actually goes forward. So your participation is very important. We know that knowledge is not on the floor, or not only on the panel, it's also on the floor. But when you ask questions, please avoid making long statements. So we want it to be interactive, and really we want to take it next step forward from here. So that's it for now. And there are 3 mentoring sessions we have kept. One is on pitching it right, access to funding and team building and social entrepreneurship. The entrepreneurs, the budding entrepreneurs, the willing entrepreneurs who really are facing the problem in these 3 sectors are welcome to join the mentoring sessions. Okay, so thank you very much, and again back to Dr. Sept.
I now request the dignitaries on the dais to inaugurate the conference by lighting the lamp. Please, sir. Thank you. I now request our Vice Chancellor, Professor Varun Sahani, to address the gathering. Please, sir.
Professor J. Mitra, Sri Amitav Bhattacharya, Professor Savita Kerkar, all our distinguished guests from outside Goa, faculty colleagues, student friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you, and welcome to Goa University. And for those of you who are not from Goa, welcome to Goa, this gorgeous, bit of God's good earth, with its red soils and its resplendent verdant hues of green and nuts vegetation and its marvelous blues. Although some of them are grays these days with the monsoons, but the blues of the waters, the ponds, the rivers, and the oceans and skies of this wonderful place. I'm delighted that we are Goa University, and in particular some of our departments, biotechnology, computer science and technology, management studies, microbiology, have all sort of joined hands and taken the lead here to get together with our very distinguished partner organizations, banglanatak.com, the International Entrepreneurship Forum, and of course Essex Business School, University of Essex, come together to organize this international conference. I think if there was ever a moment in Goa's history when we needed something like this, it is now. For a whole bunch of reasons, I think we need collectively to enthuse our younger generation to really take risks. Goans have historically been risk takers. These are the ultimate Indian Ocean people. This is the ultimate, these are the people of this part of the world. They've spawned the second largest diaspora relative to the size of the native population. I think only the Lebanese are larger in terms of native population. So these were the ultimate outgoing people. But curiously, of late, that has changed. And I think a lot of thoughtful Goans, social observers, social scientists, indeed even political leaders, certainly people involved in education and in industry, are sort of seeing a bit of a cultural change. And they wonder sometimes that there is a younger generation now growing up in Goa that's just perhaps a bit too comfortable to remain where it is. And so I do believe that, if there was ever a time when we needed to sort of once again emphasize the importance of risk-taking and entrepreneurship in our part of the world, in our part of the country, the time is now. And I think partly it's important for us, particularly in a country that has an education system that emphasizes conformity above all else. I think it's extremely important for us to develop actively, not just in a discursive sense, but in a real lived sense,
the spirit of dissent. Because if you are genuinely interested in innovation, you simply have to promote dissent. And if you have conformity, you're simply not going to have innovation. It's as simple as that. And I think we need to remind ourselves, perhaps, of the social benefits that come from breaking the rules. So that's one of the 4 or 5 things I want to briefly touch upon this morning in my address before I step down and, like all of you, hear the real expert in our midst, Professor Jay Mitra, talk to us about entrepreneurship. As a Vice Chancellor, this is unfortunately one of my jobs, which is to stand up and speak about things I know nothing about. But most of my colleagues will tell you I do it with rare aplomb, so do bear with me. I think there are in sports, and sports is of course a great metaphor of life. There are in sports some really remarkable moments in which genuine advance took place because rules were either tweaked, reinterpreted, or even broken. For instance, for those of you who are aware of amateur and athletics, track and field, and who sort of follow track and field and who follow the amazing event that is the high jump, would have heard of Dick Fosbury and the Fosbury flaw, which fundamentally redefined that entire event. The idea that you didn't approach the bar directly, but on an angle, that at a critical moment you bent away from the bar rather than towards the bar, and then you kicked yourself off in such a manner that, in fact, you were looking up at the sky and your back was parallel to the ground. It's just amazing. And like Dick Fosbury did that. He did it initially in sort of amateur collegiate competition in the United States, and then of course burst onto the scene in the 1968 Olympic Games, the Summer Olympics, and fundamentally redefined. I'm going to do something which literally is, in every sense, 180 degrees opposed to what has been done so far. So I'm not going to approach it directly. I'm not going to lean towards the bar. I'm not going to be facing it. Now but we must understand, Fosbury could do it because technology had evolved. The pit in which the athletes landed used to be basically a sand pit. And in a sand pit, obviously, the athlete had to land on his or her feet if they were not going to do themselves severe injury. But as technology advanced and it became possible in landing pits to actually have pads to absorb the impact of hitting the ground, it became possible to do things differently. So even when we celebrate innovation and we understand what the social benefits of breaking the rules are, we need to understand that every era, every epoch comes with its environment. Technology enables us to do things that we were not able to do before. The problem very often, of course, is that the technology exists, but we simply are not even understanding, the ABCs of how we can exploit that technology. So we continue to do the same old things, the same old ways, even though the technology exists. In fact, this meeting here, we could have been meeting in the 18th century in a European university. It hasn't changed. And of course, universities, we celebrate tradition. Tradition is really as important to us as innovation is. But I think we need to begin to ask ourselves those questions. Couldn't technology help us to do everything that we're going to transact over here over the next couple of days in different and more powerful and ultimately more impactful ways? Another sort of example for breaking the rules that I've come to like a lot has been the evolution of ski jumping. I don't know how many of you sort of follow the Winter Olympics and winter sports generally. Very few people in India do. But the rules of ski jumping were quite clear. You took off and you were being judged both for the distance that you jumped. So, what starts out as being seen as being something which is terrible, which is ultimately becomes a part of mainstream activity. So there are real social benefits then from breaking the rules. I think everybody is better off. But of course the challenge is to understand what are the rules that can be broken, what are the creative ways in which we can break rules so that we benefit and society benefits. That was one thought that I had in a conference of this nature on entrepreneurship as we kicked it off. Another sort of thought that I had was on what I have come over the last few years to believe is a very critical distinction that we need to make between vision and action. Because I think both of them are incredibly important for an entrepreneur. One needs to have a vision statement, but one also needs to have a plan of action. Any vision statement must ultimately state with clarity, this is where we would like to be. Any vision statement that doesn't do that is, it has to be forward-looking. It has to be about aspiration and inspiration. There's a problem with vision statements, though, which is that it can end up being the vision can end up being completely disconnected with reality. And so really, ideally, we would like to have our head in the clouds, but our feet firmly planted on the ground. And this happens with your plan of action. So we need to have both. We need to have our head in the clouds, but we need to have our feet firmly planted on the ground. So the way I've come to see it is the following, that the vision statement is the compass, and the action plan is the map, and that we need both. The action plan anchors the vision statement, but the vision propels the action. And so anybody who is serious about entrepreneurship needs, I believe, to sort of get that optimum blend between vision and action. The third thought that I had as I was going through the literature that Professor Kelkar had provided me on this conference was something that I've said a couple of other times in sort of interactions I've had in our various colleges, but I thought it would probably be relevant to what we will be discussing over the next couple of days here. And that is the concept of better. In fact, that's rapidly becoming one of my favorite words in the English language, the word better. And the reason it's becoming one of my favorite words is because we live in a world in which being the best has become a big obsession. Right? And as individuals, as institutions, striving to be the best, I suppose, makes us competitive. It does. But it also means that our measuring rod of success lies outside us. No matter how hard we try, we may not succeed at being the best. I mean, if you were, if your event was the 100-meter sprint and you were, you happened to be around in the era of Usain Bolt, you could do your very best. You could train your lungs and your legs, but you'd probably still, at best, come second. And that's the problem I've come to believe with the obsession of being the best, which is no matter how hard we try, we may not succeed at being the best. But there's another word also which then all of us fall back on, and that other word is good. I think a lot of us are satisfied at merely being good at what we do. And I've come to believe that there's a problem with that too. Because the difference between being good and merely being good enough is in fact a very narrow one. To merely be good, I believe, is to engage in a constant struggle against complacency and mediocrity. So I've come to believe, a problem with the best, the pursuit of being the best. But there's also a problem with just trying to be good. You end up really compromising, becoming complacent over time. And that leads to mediocrity. But between these two, between the best and the good, lies the better. And I've come to love that word, because the better to me suggests a deep resolve to keep improving, to make each day count a little more than the previous day. When we strive to be better, the measuring rod of success is within us, and we are competing only against our own previous selves. So I have come to believe that this incremental approach to self-improvement is what actually leads us to the promised land. It's not this blind obsession with being the best, but just being better and just going on at it and carrying on with it and just trying to do it every single day. Recently, on the social media, it's been something that's been traveling across the Spanish-speaking world, particularly the Latin American Hispanophone countries. There's a nice little kind of vignette video on entrepreneurship, and I've actually been deeply moved by it. So I just thought I'd share that with you. So, you know, it's just as in a way in praise of entrepreneurship. Obviously, I mean, it's not in Spanish, I've translated it, but I think it's wonderful. So if you indulge me, I'll just read it out. And maybe there's a version in English, but I haven't come across it. So it goes like this. Being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. Your family will constantly complain that you work too hard and that we never see you. Your employees will blame you because they will feel that you are exploiting them, without understanding that you are spreading the benefits while taking on all the risks. Your creditors will accuse you because they will feel that you are enriching yourself at their expense. Your own health will protest because there will be days when you will not eat well or will not sleep long enough. If things go well, they will be envious, and they will say that you were lucky, or that you committed fraud, or that they gifted your success to you. If things go badly, they will say that you're a fool, and they will talk about how you should have done it, although none of them would have ever attempted to do what you did. If there are profits, if there is fame, you will have many friends, many of them false. If there are losses, nobody will say, need help? Need a loan? Can I help you to make a fresh start? In general, your family, your customers, your suppliers, your employees, your life partner will criticize you, blame you, and make demands upon you. For all these reasons, being a risk taker and entrepreneur is one of the most honorable and admirable jobs that exists, with so much at stake and with almost no one valuing it. And for all that, you have faith, you fight for a dream, and you're improving not just your own life, but the lives of all those touched by you. Others worry about putting food on their table. You, risk taker and entrepreneur, worry about the food on the tables of others. Political parties, public functionaries, big public works, electoral campaigns, all are possible because you pay your taxes. For this reason, all risk takers and entrepreneurs, from those who run a grocery store, a carpenter shop, a workshop, to the biggest entrepreneurs, I greet you, I admire you, I applaud you, I support you, I walk with you, I listen to you. And above all else, you are in my prayers. Because only the one who carries the load knows how much it weighs. I think there is true nobility in this. And I hope if we are, in the course of this conference, hearing some of these extremely distinguished thinkers on entrepreneurship, that those who themselves spend their lives in enterprise, being entrepreneurs. And if we are able to spark this off among our young ones, I think, this would be one of the most worthwhile conferences that this university has ever involved itself with. So thank you again, all of you, for being here. I hope you make the most of this.
I now request Professor Jay Mitra, Professor of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, to deliver his keynote address.
I think Amitav started off the session by talking about a rather interesting journey, and I have been very fortunate to be part of it and work with him to try and progress and go ahead. There's a particular saying about that part of India that I come from, which is Bengal, like him, and the great playwright Bahadur Sarkar said about Bengalis that, have you ever seen a Bengali move ahead? They tend to think ahead, but have you actually sort of seen the Bengalis move ahead? And it has sort of precipitated a notion of what needs to be done in life is perhaps that there is more to life in action rather than just thought. And indeed, the great philosopher Gilbert Ryle commented that action always precedes thought, because it is essentially action that enables thought to be generated in due course. But I start my little inaugural presentation. After hearing Varun Sani, I've decided to throw away my planned presentation, because that was, if anything, a masterclass in entrepreneurial ideals and entrepreneurial values. Then it's a difficult act to follow this. But I will try my level best at least to supplement it rather than make any other presentation. I start with a particular quote from the great American writer, Susan Sontag. It's difficult to refer to American writers these days, especially in the age of Trumpian tweets. But Susan Sontag precedes that particular culture. And she once wrote that every era has to reinvent itself. Every epoch has to reinvent itself. And by definition, she was saying that every era constitutes the people, constitutes the organizations, constitutes the environment. All of them have to reinvent themselves. The question, as always, has been, how do you do it? How do you reinvent yourself? How do people reinvent themselves? By answering the question, what is better rather than best? By organizations continually recreating themselves and enabling an enabling environment in which new organizations can be formed and created, and existing organizations can replenish and reinvent themselves. That, to me, lies at the heart of entrepreneurship, because what this reinvention, what this recreation really is about is essentially what I think entrepreneurship is about, and that is value creation. But the word value is rather abstract. What do we essentially mean by value and value creation? By value creation, I refer to an individual's personal value creation, the sense of accomplishment, the sense of being something else, the sense of endeavor, and the outcomes that result in you being emerging as a new individual. That is the constant push of the entrepreneur. But the entrepreneur seldom does it for himself or herself without realizing, or rather without necessarily wanting simply to feed himself or herself. The entrepreneur's primary motivation is to generate the quality of betterness, the quality of improvement, the quality of change in our lives, and especially in the lives of people, through the identification of opportunity and the mobilization of resources and the creation of new organizations. Now, this is only possible when you have an environment in which the institutions, and by institutions I do not mean just government institutions. By institutions I mean the way we do things, the way we actually live our lives, the culture of adoption, the culture of absorption of values. If I create something new, would you accept what I've created for yourself and for others? If you do not accept it, my essential purpose in life is nullified as an entrepreneur. Because an entrepreneur's success is not measured simply by the money that he or she generates. If that was the case, then you would be far better off struggling less and gambling away in any of the casinos on the water outside, or indeed anywhere else for that matter. The entrepreneur's success and the measuring rod that Professor Sani was saying earlier on often is found outside oneself, but also inside. And that is the nature of the value creation process. And I think this is this value creation process through people, through organizations, and through an environment which is conducive to enabling people to create new organizations that lies at the heart of entrepreneurship. This can only happen essentially in an ecosystem in which these three dimensions are affordable, in which people actually, a whole region, in a sense, decides that it is time for a change. And it works on the basis of not only creating some kind of great political movement or action, but works on the basis of what is possible in its local context by people who create and people who make things happen in different ways of life. And there are numerous examples of that in Goa. I do not know Goa that well, but from everything that I've heard and everything that listened, you look at the pockets of endeavor which are incredible and incredibly powerful. But these pockets need to be brought together in some form as part of an ecosystem in which there's this sharing of values, in which there's this collaboration of values. And extraordinarily, we live in very, very strange times. We live in times when perhaps no country can essentially be afraid of telling people that we have lifted our people out of poverty in more ways than one, and it's not just China. We have fewer conflicts in the world. We have rampant technological progress taking place all over the world. But nevertheless, it is not driving change in the way. We have more fragmented society than ever before. And particularly around the world, we see that many of our institutions are failing to offer the kind of sort of solutions, whether in terms of jobs, whether it's in terms of the future of young people's lives. At no point in history have young people found themselves to be less well off than their previous generation. This is the first time in the history of human civilization that this has occurred. So what kind of legacy is my generation, and indeed other generations, leaving behind for the very young people who aspire to be entrepreneurs? Will they be operating as future entrepreneurs with vast amounts of technology, but with less for themselves in the lives that they lead? Less in terms of the environment, which is heavily polluted, less in terms of the society, which is hugely fragmented, less in terms of the ability to even earn a good, decent form of life. How is that going to be changing? And each entrepreneur's mission, if you like, and if you look at the track record of each entrepreneur's mission is to change that. Not just change it through technology, but change it through this form of empowerment that comes out of value creation. So entrepreneurship is about value creation, and it's about something that Amitav and I discussed, that perhaps it's time in India that we do not simply look at entrepreneurship in terms of what we can replicate from the Silicon Valley or indeed other parts of the world. what we need to have, perhaps, is an idea of entrepreneurship as a social movement. Every successful social movement, including the independence that was granted in this country, the vision of Gandhi, the purposeful action of Gandhi, all of these constituted a form of entrepreneurship which has never been recognized in India, never been recognized as part of the world. It's been seen primarily in pure political terms. Now, if we flip that and actually reinvent ourselves and say, well, look at the possibilities of change that have occurred throughout our history, and we can see the possibilities of change that can occur in the future. This is what entrepreneurship is about. This is what entrepreneurship as a social movement is about. Every social movement that is successful generates change, and generates change in the values that we have of ourselves, and indeed the values by which we live in our society. Entrepreneurship as a whole process, not just individual entrepreneurs. The idea that individual entrepreneurs alone can change the world is daft. But the fact is that if we can generate an entrepreneurial spirit amongst people, the ability to recognize that there is value, that entrepreneurs are not just sleazebags who simply are there to generate money for themselves, as indeed many are. And we will not mention names, but many are. Many are participants in this huge nexus of political and economic and social corruption that results in a complete shutdown of, if you like, our moral values, our social values, and indeed the basic ethics by which we live in society. But for those who ride above that, those who see the possibilities of change occurring through the creation of new goods, new services, new opportunities, and the creation of new firms which change the way that we actually sort of live our lives, these are indeed the pioneers of social change as well as entrepreneurial change. So entrepreneurship, especially for the young ones, do not be deceived by the notion that if you're being asked to look at the possibility of being entrepreneurial, that you have to start a business. That is not being entrepreneurial. Being entrepreneurial is, of course, for those who wish to become entrepreneurs, to start a new venture. But being entrepreneurial is also about generating change through the creation of new types of organizations, new ways of thinking in terms of the work that you do, new ways of thinking in terms of the social change that you can generate in your own communities alongside with other people. And that is the reason why we have in the possibilities in the world today of a new kind of sort of change through entrepreneurship and innovation, which is simply not just about new business creation. It is the creation of new values. It's the creation of reinventing yourself. Every era, every place, every time, every organization needs to reinvent itself. That is at the heart of entrepreneurship. And that is what I hope that we will achieve through the numerous contributions that we will listen to and hear about during the course of the day. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you again.